To get started, I needed a tank. This is my 29-gallon tank that I got from PetSmart. This is the top fin kit that came with the heater, the tank, the light, which is attached to the lid, and the hang-on back filter. And it also came with a thermometer, which I broke the first day, so I had to get a new thermometer. Anyway, get a floating thermometer. Maybe that's a good tip from the start. I also had to get some materials to put inside it, so I went out in the woods up at my brother's house and found some sticks that I could possibly use and some stone to decorate the tank, some larger stone. The sticks I grabbed were hawthorn because I looked up online and it said that I could use applewood, oak, hawthorn, sycamore, and a lot of other types of wood. So what we have up at the property is hawthorn, which that had the most character to it, so I found a dead piece of hawthorn and brought it home. I also grabbed some flat limestone that was up there making my brother's driveway at his house, and I put it in the tank to do a little bit of a rough scaping, see how things fit before I put it all together. The stick I got had to be cut because it was too big, so it ended up turning into 3 pieces, which worked out great. But usually you're supposed to boil your wood before putting it into the tank. It was too big for that, so I just went ahead and put it straight in. I soaked it and did some water changes for a whole week, doing full water changes every day to try and get all the tannins and anything else that was on the wood to get soaked out of there and get it cleaned up before I added any fish or plants in there. To start, I did a perimeter of some aquarium gravel, which is a little bit larger and lighter. I got that from Petco, so it was a little bit cheaper than the finished product that I wanted to use, but I wanted to make some height with my substrate, so I'm using this cheaper substrate underneath the more expensive substrate to get some height. I pushed all that gravel to the edges because I didn't want my soil to fall out to the edge of the glass so I could see it. So I pretty much made a perimeter, and then I dumped in my fluval stratum aqua soil. I dumped that in and I powdered it up the way I wanted the mound to be, which is pretty much all tapered up to the center because I want the fish to be able to go all the way around it, and yeah, it looks good that way. I'll be planting straight into the soil, but I don't want to see it. I want it completely covered. So I'm taking more of the gravel and filling in the edges so it pretty much encases the soil into the center and holds it in place. And then I'm going to take my tool that I got for aquascaping to help reach into the tank and do some work. I'm going to take that and I'm going to pull the gravel away from the glass edge so it has more of a tapered effect. I don't want to just square it up along the bottom of the tank. I want it to actually rise up to the center. So it's tapered away from the glass, and then I'm taking my fancier, darker substrate, which is a little bit smaller gravel, and I'm putting that on the outside. So that's what I'm going to see from the outside of the glass instead of seeing the tan. So I put that all the way around, and you can see how it has the different layers going around it. I have it tapered down to the right side because I walk around the tank to the right more often and I want to see it from that side. And I was thinking about making a little beach right there for anything that wants to use sand. So I have kind of a multi-layer plus different textures inside the tank. So I have it tapered down to the right, and I put some stone at the bottom of that just so when I put sand in it doesn't compact down to the bottom. And now I'm starting to place the sticks in there in different places to try and create nice little nooks and crannies and caves and places for the fish to explore and be able to hide and get away from the lights or the other fishies. It's going to be a community tank, so there's going to be a lot of different types of creatures in here, and they all need to get along and feel like they have their own space. I poured the sand in and I kept it mounted up away from the stone so I could finish sculpting it and getting everything placed in there before I put in the finished grade. Now I'm going to cover up the rest of the beige stone, tan stone, with my darker gray, smaller stone, and that is easy to do with a little Tupperware container. You can shake it down in there, get as much as you want where you want it. So I got a nice cave with the one piece of wood that I cut off of the main piece, and then I have a nice little archway that they can swim through, and I think it's really coming together. Nice natural look. One thing I do realize after the fact is that I should have put the stick on the wood onto the aqua soil and then filled in the stone all around it to help the wood from floating, because that becomes a problem whenever you start filling it up with water. The wood is pretty buoyant and will start floating. So a couple of the pieces were okay. I had the rocks on them, but I do add rocks as this starts to fill up because the wood was still pretty buoyant after soaking it. So we can see the water filling up and saturating through the different layers as it gets all the brand new substrate covered with water. And I thought it just looked great filling up. Got real excited, making a little ecosystem here inside my room. And the sticks I picked already had some moss and algae on them, so I left it. Didn't even scrub it off. We'll see how it reacts under the water over time, but I felt I'd just leave it as natural as possible and do some water changes instead of scrubbing all that off. So I put a piece of paper towel down on the rocks and I threw the hose in there. I kept the pressure real low and had it on shower setting so it wasn't moving anything around as it was coming out. The paper towel helps disperse the water so it doesn't push my gravel around or create a little hole where it's filling up. You can see all the substrates pumping out bubbles now, especially the sand because it was very dry going in. It might be a good idea to wet your sand evenly before you put it in, but it's another thing I just did on the go. I think it's really coming together. The water's filling up and starting to make it look like an actual something going on. I don't know what it is, but as soon as I start seeing things actually submerged in the water, I think it looks so much better. It's really starting to come together here. I had to add a stone onto the archway log because it started to float up and move. I put a big chunk of coral on the main log and I already had a stone on the other log, so this was to help it stay in the water, keep it from floating up. Like I said, I have to drain the water and flush it out, do a water change every day to get all the tannins out of the water because it's making the water a little bit brown, and flush out anything from the new substrate. So I took this suction hose with a little pump on the bottom and some 5-gallon buckets, and I'd put it in there and I'd just suck out all the water and then put fresh new water in every night for the first week. It is very light suction, so you're not going to really disturb too much, but I wasn't trying to press it into anything to move anything or disturb anything before. I was just trying to suck the water out, so I was trying to see how much it had suction, but it didn't. Now after doing the water changes, and since I enjoy gardening, I figured I'd do some gardening inside my tank too. And I wanted to make it as natural as possible. I didn't want to put a bunch of plastic plants in here. The plants I had decided to go with, first one I'm planting here, you can see, is the rosette sword The big ones behind it you can see are the El Nino fern. There's a lot that goes along with the underwater plants, and they grow a lot differently than above ground or terrestrial plants, but I decided I wanted to plant the aquarium out to make it all natural and make an ecosystem that could work together with the fish and keep it all clean as best as possible. Some plants want to be buried into gravel, some like to have the aqua soil, and some don't want to be buried at all. They just want to be tied to a rock or a chunk of wood. The El Nino fern I have planted in the back by the heater. That one has a rhizome which once doesn't want to be planted, so that I had to take some peaches and cream 100% cotton string, and then I ripped it apart to get individual strands, and I took one strand apiece and tied the ferns to the logs, main central log, driftwood. And then the other one is an African water fern I have here, and it is the same way. It has a rhizome, it doesn't want to be buried, so I took the string and I made a loop. I took the loop, I hooked it onto the wood, and then I took my tweezers and I worked the fern into the loop and then tightened it down. And then I cut off the excess string so it wasn't flapping in the water. And for good measure, I took a Nubus leaf, a Nubus nana, that I have planted next to the cave, and I hid the cotton string with the leaf. So it's looking pretty good. I got the green in there, but I also want some more color. So the other plant I got was a tissue culture bag of cardinalis, and this plant is a red aquatic plant, and it wants to be planted into the substrate so it can draw its nutrients from its roots and not just its leaves flowing in the water. I take my tweezers and I pinch them out and bury them straight into the substrate. It's easier to use the tweezers because your fingers are bigger, and sometimes you can just pull the plant right out as you're trying to plant it in. I did accidentally buy one plant, a white ribbon, and it does say on the package live semi-aquatic plant, so I should have known when I bought it, but I just went by looking at the foliage. And you have to be careful because it's semi-aquatic, so it actually doesn't want to be completely submerged. It just wants its roots in water. So you'll see that one. I put that one out in the goldfish pond, and we'll do a update on that pond later on. So once I put the plants in, I needed to fill it back up with water because the plants like to be underwater. So now that the plants are in, I need water in there. I can't leave them go. As I was planting, I took the mister bottle and I sprayed it all over the plants as I was planting, because it actually took some time to get all these in there where I wanted them, and yeah, I wanted to keep them wet. So one thing I didn't mention, before you plant them, you want to take them all out of their packaging, open them all up, get them out of their cocoa fiber pots or the plastic that they're wrapped in, and soak them in a bucket of water for a while, just to make sure you don't have any snails or pests or anything hitchhiking on the plants, and then you can go ahead and plant them. The cardinalis tissue culture I was able to separate into a lot of plants. I don't know, I didn't count them, but a lot of plants, so I could cover the whole bottom. Maybe give some baby fishes some coverage, or the shrimp some coverage. I don't know what I'm getting just yet, but plan on having a diverse community in here, community tank of all types. So getting it filled up now, and I'm actually gonna let this aquarium cycle and run the filter for a while with the plants and let it build up some algae even before I introduce any fish. I want the aquarium to be a live ecosystem that I'm going to put the fish into, instead of just a sterile water environment, glass tank. So I think the tank's looking pretty good so far, and we'll be doing updates on the tank as I go forward, and we'll see what else I can put into this thing, because I'm really enjoying the aquarium, planted aquarium thing. So there might be more planted aquariums to come. We'll see. But thanks for watching. You can find me and Echo on the next one.